you surrender, or your half-hearted submission is worthless. But you've submitted totally, you say. You made the decision that your life's worth resides in Christ and Him alone. You've given Him everything you owe and everything you've ever held back. All that stuff Lamont talked about, the money, the car, the friends, the relationship, everything, you've let it go. But what's next? What comes after that? There are a couple examples shown in 1 Samuel of people on both sides of the fence. People who didn't answer the call and those that did. If you turn with me in your Bibles to 1 Samuel 2 verse 12 and 1 Samuel 3 verse 1. On one hand, we have the boy Samuel. On one hand, we have the boy Samuel, who had his life devoted entirely to the Lord at a young age by his mother. On the other hand, we have Eli's sons. Both of them worked in the temple. However, one of them, one said, did not have their lives totally devoted to God, and one of them did. 1 Samuel 2 verse 12 says, Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. In the New King James Version it says, Now the sons of Eli were corrupt. Sons of Belial literally means sons of the devil. These are the sons of the high priest, working in the temple, doing God's work supposedly, yet they were sons of the devil and did not know the Lord. They had answered their call, yet they still did not know the Lord, and they still did not submit and surrender fully. 1 Samuel 3 verse 1, it says something about Samuel working in the temple. Can you read this from me real quick, Mama? 1 Samuel 3 verse 1.
The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions.
Every one of us has been called to give all. Just like Samuel, we've been called into the work of the Lord. The effect of our ministry depends on the effect to which we completely submit and surrender. There's no way our ministry can be effective unless we do what Lamont said, like Lamont was instructed by God to say, and we fully surrender, fully submit everything that we're holding back. There's no way VOT as a choir can sing and be effective. We can sing and sound good. There's no way we can sing and be effective ministers unless we surrender ourselves fully to the Lord. There's no way your ministry can be effective in your field where you work unless your life is completely surrendered to God. As we look at 1 Samuel 3, as we look at 1 Samuel 3, we're going to see the effect of one person whose life is called by God. I'm reading from verses 1 I'll just stop on the Lord Tuesday. It says, And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. And it came to pass, at the time when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim and could not see. Verse 4. That the Lord, verse 3, And here's the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep. That the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. And he ran unto Eli and said, Here am I, for thou callest me. And he said, I call not, lay down again. And he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel rose and went to Eli again, and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli answered, I called you not. Go lie down again. Now Samuel did not know the Lord, not yet know the Lord, and neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Verse 9, the last verse. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go lie down, and it shall be, if he call me, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went down and laid in his place. Let's take a look at these verses 1 through 9, and see some of the different characteristics of this calling. There have been many called like Samuel was, not in the same style, but there have many been called by God like Samuel was. Abraham was called to be the father of many nations. The disciples were called by Jesus to become fishers of men. Moses was called to lead his people out of Egypt. Jonah was called to preach to Nineveh. All these people were called. Samuel had some special circumstances, however. First off, Samuel was a young boy, given by his mother to a life of service from even before he was born. It says, the boy Samuel ministered unto the Lord before the high priest Eli in the temple. Samuel, he ministered unto the Lord, but it's interesting to note that Samuel did not yet know the Lord when he called him. If you take a look at verse 7, it says, now the boy Samuel did not yet know the Lord. It says, now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. Like with Eli's sons, Samuel was working in the temple for the high priest, doing the Lord's work, yet did not know the Lord, and the word of the Lord was not yet revealed to him. Samuel's life was fully submitted and fully surrendered unto God, yet he had not answered the call that God had in store for his life. You say you've surrendered, you say you've given up everything, you say you put yourself in a situation where God can use you. Now, it's on us as Christians to await God's call, God's specific call for our life, and to answer in the correct manner. He didn't even know that it was God who was calling him. The first time God calls him, Samuel gets up and runs to Eli. Sir, he called him. Very polite, very respectful, quick, just hopped out of his bed. I probably wouldn't have hopped out of my bed that fast, but that's just me. Hopped out of his bed, went to Eli, and called him. Eli said, no, go to sleep. The Lord called again. He hopped out of his bed, ran to Eli. Eli said, no, I didn't call you. Go to sleep. But if he calls you again, it's the Lord. Samuel did not even know that it was the Lord who was calling him. He was lying in the temple, sleeping after doing a day filled with ministering to others of his fellow Israelites, and he still did not yet know that it was the Lord's voice who was calling him and what the Lord wanted him to do. God also called many of us hesitate in ministry, chosen for our lives, because we are unsure if it's the one specifically chosen for us by God. Many of us put our hands into different things because we're not sure what God has specifically called us to do. Samuel put himself in a place where the Lord could use him. Samuel put himself in a place where he could be available for God's particular use and waited until God's specific call was placed upon his life. It's almost akin to us being earthen vessels, but instead of just hiding ourselves away or us being used for every little thing that comes by, we place ourselves on the shelf, waiting for the Master to come and take us down and to use us for what he sees fit. Instead of lending ourselves out to anybody who comes by wanting to fill us with anything that they see fit, we put ourselves on the shelf and simply wait for the Lord's hand to guide us into what we're supposed to do. God also called Jeremiah in a similar manner. And he calls us the same way. He says in Jeremiah 1 verses 5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. He called Jeremiah, and he calls us in a similar manner. Just as Samuel had been in the church, working for the high priest, and did not know the Lord for himself, you may hesitate to answer the call because you feel you do not have the same level of spirituality that others possess. This level of spirituality can be seen as a sort of crutch when answering the call. The Lord called Samuel before he knew him, while he was just in a position where he was able to be used. This level of spirituality only describes your relationship and your connection between you and God. God calls Samuel before he knew him, when his level of spirituality would be at the lowest that you could ever have when he did not know God. The psalmist says in Psalm 51:17 that the sacrifices of God are a broken heart and a contrite spirit. That's really all that God desires of you in order for you to step out and to answer his call. A broken heart, a contrite spirit, the total and complete submission and surrender that Lamont spoke of. That's all that God requires of you. Lamont spoke earlier about certain times when God wakes you up in the middle of the night simply to have that relationship with you, to build you, to call you. I mean, even for me, myself, personally, I wasn't quite sure if I should speak, if I should not speak, if I should speak the Sabbath, if I should do what's that prayer meeting, worship in the bus. And God tapped me on the shoulder one morning at like 3:35. And I'm kind of a heavy sleeper. Yes, no, yes. We had an experience in the bus of me sleeping knocked out. God woke me up at 3:35 and I sat up for some reason. I was just like, something happened. And God was just like, I called Samuel. I need you to do something. And I was just like, ooh. You sure you don't want to go back to sleep, God? It's not a dream. But it's really true. Sometimes God wakes you up in the middle of the night because he knows if he tries to talk to you during the day, the person beside you may distract you. He knows if he tries to talk to you during the day, your teacher may have an extra assignment that you have that you have to keep working on. He knows if he calls you during the day, he has an opportunity. There's an opportunity that you might get a phone call or a text message or something that will interrupt your connection between you and him.
Come on, boy.
Does anybody get text messages or phone calls or people work at 3:45 in the morning? No? Okay. Sometimes God has to call you at a time where it's really just you and him. It's like he has your full attention.
Amen.
Back to Samuel and Jeremiah. Some of you have answered the call. But like myself, you aren't sure why the way seems more difficult than you imagined. Answering the call, you've answered your specific call, but in this situation, we can look to other people, examples of people being called to encourage us. Jeremiah was also called in his youth, just like Samuel. But Jeremiah had some doubts. In Jeremiah 1 verse 7, God calls Jeremiah, and like in verse 5, he said, I knew you before you were born. I called you and I ordained you a prophet to the nations. But in Jeremiah 1 verse 7, Jeremiah complains, I'm but a youth. I'm too young. Just like Moses had excuses when he was called, saying, I'm a man, I stuff. Moses had excuses. Jeremiah had excuses. But Jeremiah says in verse 6, Jeremiah says, Lord, God, behold, I cannot speak, for I'm a child. The Lord answers Jeremiah, and he answers those of us. He says, say not that you are a child, for you shall go to all that I shall send you, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. God says, Jeremiah, relax. I know you're a child. Remember, I knew you when you were in your mother's womb. But I called you to do this, so don't worry about it. Whatever I called you to do, you'll do. Whatever I tell you to speak, you'll speak. So to my young people, when God calls you to do something, don't hesitate because you feel you're too young. Don't hesitate because you feel you can't get the ear of all those people who are in charge, all those elderly people, all the old people, everybody who's been in their position for years. It doesn't matter. Whatever God calls you to do, you'll do. Whatever God calls you to say, you say. Samuel was called as a boy. Jeremiah was called as a boy. Jesus was in the temple at 12, teaching the elders exactly what they should be doing based on his relationship with God. So don't lose heart because you're young, as proven in these few examples. He lets Jeremiah know that he need not be afraid of what people may say because he is standing by. He says, be not afraid of their faces, verse 8, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord. Be not afraid of their faces. Be not afraid of what they say. Be not afraid of what they hear. Because your relationship and your covenant, your call, does not come from them.
Hey, come on.
Your call comes from me.
Preach.
I'm here to deliver you. So when you answer the call, when you submit your life to Christ, when you answer the call, don't have any concern with what people may say. Don't have any concern with what people may hear about you. Don't have any concern with what your reputation might be. Because He's the one who calls you, and He's the one who promised to deliver you. Now, I'm not the type of person to sugarcoat things, don't get me wrong. When you answer the call, the faces will be there. The people talking will be there. The people saying things about you that you have no idea where they came from, they will be there. Trust, I know from experience. I'm a pastor's kid. I'm one of the pastor's kid who was coming, like in the mom's example. I'm one of those. I'm a pastor's kid. And I know from experience that when you have your mind set on Christ, people will undoubtedly throw rocks in your path trying to get you stumble. People will say things about you behind your back simply because they don't agree with the way you're going about the Lord's call. Those people will be there, and they were there in Jeremiah's case as well. If we go to Jeremiah chapter 20, we can see this in his case. The high priest at the time, the pastor, the spiritual leader of Israel, Pashur, stepped in Jeremiah's way. He struck Jeremiah and had him placed in the stocks due to the message Jeremiah had from the Lord.
Right.
So Jeremiah, chapter 1, was called. In chapter 20, after answering the call and after doing what the Lord had commanded him to do and speaking what the Lord had commanded him to say, Jeremiah was struck in the face by the high priest, by the spiritual leader of Israel, and placed in the stocks. Does anyone know what stocks are? Does anyone know? You do? Does anyone want to answer? Stocks? No? No? Okay. Stocks are sort of like, they're something used for public ridicule. Stocks usually have 3 openings, or maybe 5. One for you to put your neck through, 2 for you to put your hands through, and some of them come with 2 to put your feet through. And then the top is closed over you, and you're locked in, unable to move your hands, or your neck, or your feet. Now Jeremiah was placed in the stocks and left in the public square to be ridiculed and mocked and teased and derised for simply spreading the word that the Lord had called him to do. Jeremiah was publicly ridiculed by the priest for following the Lord's call. Jesus said, don't be afraid when the world hates you, because just know that it has hated me first.
Wow.
So we should not expect that when we answer the call, that our way will be perfectly smooth. There will be those people who purposely step in our way. There will be those people who purposely make up things against us. Jesus said, I go before you, but don't expect to have your way clear. Know that the world hates you because it hated me first, and you're following my footsteps. So when you answer the call, don't get discouraged because people are standing in your way. Look to Jesus and continue moving on in faith because He is standing by. While preparing this message, I came across a couple of quotes. And one quote by an anonymous, I don't know what that is, says, every flower that blossomed had to go through a lot of dirt to get there. One more time. Every flower that blossomed, every 700-foot sequoia that blossomed, had to go through a lot of dirt to get there. So your calling, your spiritual flower, if you really intend for it to grow like it's supposed to, can it grow without pushing through the dirt? No. So the dirt will be there, but know that God is with you through it all. Mother Teresa said, I know God will not give me anything I can't handle. I just wish He didn't trust me so much. God also says He's giving you everything. He doesn't give you anything beyond that you can bear. But when you're tempted, whenever situations arise that you feel you can't handle, whenever people step in your path, the Lord has placed for you a way out. He called Himself the deliverer. David called Him the strong tower. He's called the Messiah, the King of Kings, El Shaddai. All His different names give you an indication as to how He will rescue you from your situations and help you to truly answer your call. Remember these key 3 things, as if you don't retain anything else from this message today, remember these key 3 things. 1, God is calling you. That's the basics. God is calling you. Yes, you texting over there in the corner, you who's sleeping over there on the side, you, and you, and you, and you. God is calling you. Every single one of us, God has called. He's called all of us each in a unique, specific way, but it simply depends on our submission and our reaction to His calling. Even you, the group of young kids, the 5 and 6-year-olds who came up for children's story, your age isn't a problem, like with Samuel and Jeremiah, and the words are not yours. So really, all you have to do is surrender, step up to the plate, let God do the work, and trust in Him for the results. There will be trials, too. There will be trials and difficult circumstances that step in your way. People will throw rocks. That's not an if. That people will throw rocks. Like in the case of Jeremiah and Pashur. People will come up against you simply because you are doing the work of God and answering His call. But when this happens, we have to trust and realize that God has promised in Jeremiah 1:9 to be our deliverer, even when the faces turn against us. And number 3, the only way to truly answer the call is to fully submit all of yourself wholly to Jesus Christ and to what He has called you to do. Even if you aren't sure of your specific calling, like Samuel was, and had to be called 3 times before he realized that it was the Lord calling him, and before he found out what he had to do. Place yourself like he did, fully submitted, in a position where the Lord can use you to do whatever it is that He sees fit. Place yourself somewhere, put yourself in situations where the Lord sees you as a vessel that can be used to spread His word. Those 3 things are the messages I want to leave with you today. But as I close, I want to leave you with a story. So it's told of an 11th century king in Moravia, King Henry III, who became fed up with the constant stress of court life and the pressures of being a monarch. So he went to the town one day and went to the monastery and decided to commit himself to a life of service as a monk. Decided to give up on being king and commit himself to a life of service. And he went to Prior Richard and asked to be accepted as a contemplative at the local monastery. Your Majesty, said Prior Richard, you understand that the pledge here is one of obedience. That will be hard because you have been a king. I understand, said Henry. The rest of my life I will be obedient to you as Christ leads you. And I will tell you what to do, said Prior Richard. Go back to the throne and serve faithfully where God has put you. When King Henry died, it was said of him, the king learned to rule by being obedient. How many of us have been kings of our own lives? How many of us are failing under the stresses and the problems and the pressures of being the monarch of your own life? How many of us are dealing with the stresses of the court, the stresses of daily life when you rule over your life, and are looking for an escape, looking for an out somewhere where you can find relief from this pressure? It's really simple. It's in the words of what Prior Richard said. He said, go back to being a king. But I'm telling you today, go back to your king. Go back to Christ. Make Him the king of your life. and learn to be obedient to Him and His calling, and see where it takes you. See where all the issues and problems, see how they fall back to the wayside. Answer the call. Have you heard His voice calling you in the middle of the night? Will you answer the call? Maybe you answer the call for your life, but your work is hindered by the fact that you haven't completely surrendered your life to Christ. You're still holding on to those fickle and finite things. Answer the call. For some of you, He's calling for baptism. For some of you, He's calling you to ministry. For some of you, it's simply a call to restore the relationship you have with Him or a close friend. Answer the call. He's calling. Answer the call. For some of you, today, it's baptism. It's committing your life to Him fully for the first time. For others of you, it's just committing your life to Him again. Because you committed, but like my son is just falling off to the side. For some of you, it's just a reassurance that He will be there, and He will be there to deliver you when those people stand up against you and try to deter your walk with Christ and you answering the call. Today, all I'm asking is that you answer the call. If you would like to answer the call with me and devote your life to Christ today,